mic check, please.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Chris Jennings.
I'm your host, Dr. Mike Brazier.
My name is John Gordon. I'll be your host.
And I'm your host, Katie Burke.
Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America. The DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, John Gordon, and my guest today is someone I just spent some time with. We're filming some DU Nation content again on the Texas coast. A lot of folks out there, you've seen his work. He's been a contributing photographer to Ducks Unlimited magazine for many years. So a lot of his images have been taken from right here in that same Texas Middle Coast area that we were at. And he's also runs what I consider to be, not only in Texas, but around the country, one of the top duck clubs in America, Thunderbird Hunting Club. So welcome to the podcast, Todd Steele.
Thank you, John. Glad to be here, and hopefully I can help some folks out there with the duck ponds.
What we covered really in DU Nation, folks, was behind the scenes of habitat management, especially more soil unit habitat management, which is primarily the thing that Ducks Unlimited is involved in. And we've through the Texas Prairie Wetlands Project, have been involved with quite a few projects, Todd, over the years. Do you remember how many that we've done with Thunderbird?
Oh, I'm going to guess it's probably at least 2 dozen. And when we talk about a duck pond too, we have some projects that DU has helped us build that are probably knocking on the door of 100 acres. So, you go around the country and some people fish in lakes that are only 100 acres. So that kind of gives you an idea how big these things are. I want to say if you took all our habitat together right now that we flood, which is close to maybe 2,000 acres, if you took all those ponds and stacked them side by side, you're talking about an area probably 5 to 6 square miles wide. So it takes a lot of effort to build them, maintain them, and keep them going.
Isn't that the truth? Y'all have a tremendous amount of habitat down there and hold a tremendous amount of ducks. I've been fortunate enough to hunt on one of the properties, actually 2 of the properties in the past, and I tell you that I can tell everybody out there that the hunting was outstanding. So I wanted to talk about the club, real quick, just to start out with. How long has it been in existence?
Well, close to 40 years, and kind of give you a background on how it kind of all started. I was a commercial diver back in the 70s and 80s, and there was a slump that hit the oil field at that time, and one of the friends that I was duck hunting with on another club, we weren't real happy with how the club was being ran, and he kind of looked at me and he said, "Well, we start our own club." And he said, "You're kind of somewhat out of work. What do you want? Would you be willing to do that if I financed you on the first go around?" And I thought about it overnight, and it probably wasn't even overnight. It was kind of like immediately I said, "Yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to go out there and try to form a club and provide not just good hunting for myself, but for others." And as the years progressed, providing good hunting for myself was not as important as providing good hunting for others. It was a little bit of philanthropy, so to speak. You get so much more satisfaction out of watching a little boy and his father come in with his first duck hunt than I'll ever get by shooting limited ducks within 30 minutes. And as the years progressed, that desire to provide good hunting for others just kind of manifested itself and got stronger and stronger. We're now it's pretty much my driving force, and I need to include my family and the managers of the club. They're all in it with me. It's just not it's not a one man show. It's those guys helping me as we go through this process every year.
Getting to spend some time with your wife Nancy last week was really great. I know she's a real driving force behind the club.
Well, the club wouldn't exist. She wasn't supportive of this. And go quick story on my wife real quick. I actually met her in a rice field at the time. She was with another fellow at the time. And as fate kind of happened years passed, we finally got together. But her first duck hunt, we had thousands of pintails coming into a flooded rice field. It was just phenomenal. I was back in the days when pintails were 7-8 million birds, and
the glory days of Texas coast, right?
Yeah. I still remember those days. But that we had 2 hunts that year that were like that. That pintails just came in, and it would just your jaw dropped when you saw that. Anyway, that was her first hunt, and she. I remember walking the field there. Well, that was kind of fun.
She can only go downhill from there.
Well, she's had some good hunts since then. A lot of really good hunts. But I said, man, you just watch something that was maybe a once in a lifetime experience to see something like that, So anyway, that's kind of a memory that my wife and I have.
Right, and I know your sons are highly involved in it as well, and I know your son Forrest is about to be the chapter chairman at the Aggieland chapter of Texas A&M.
Yeah, yes, sir. He's getting geared up for that. He's actually heading down here right now to help me with some habitat, work around the lodge, which never stops, and he'll be down here for 3 or 4 days helping me, and then off and on throughout the summer. Both the boys are down here, and my wife is by my side throughout this whole process. She works remote, so you kind of saw firsthand. She had her computer out there, working at her other job, and she is by my side, pretty much through this whole process.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have a family affair like that. You've got your wife, your sons helping you out. It makes it easier to get it all done. Plus, more enjoyable, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. And she understands the trials and tribulations of doing this. It's never a smooth road. It's got all kinds of curveballs throughout the whole season that you got to deal with, and not just from a habitat standpoint, but a duck standpoint, a hunter standpoint. You're dealing with a tremendous amount of variables that are thrown into a big melting pot that you got to deal with to keep this thing going. So.
Right. And how many members do you have right now?
Well, we don't really discuss that, John, but we have, let's just say we have over 70 members, put it that way. So
that's what I thought. And most of these folks are from the Houston area, am I correct?
Yeah, there's a few that fly in, believe it or not, from South Carolina. We got a few from Dallas, one from San Antonio. But for the most part, they're from Houston. And, as a club was kind of evolving, you kind of listen to what the members want. In other words, you're not gonna survive if you don't provide them a good quality experience and something that they pay for. And all this club does not exist without these members joining this club, because they provide the money. I want to say we're probably, our budget now is knocking on the door of $750,000 to run this thing. It's not cheap. And we wouldn't be able to do it if the members weren't joining the club. So over the years, we've kind of watched what they like to do. And back in the heyday when we had snow geese all over the place down here, the members did not want to hunt snow geese. They wanted to hunt ducks. And so that was kind of the business model from day one, is we want to shoot ducks. Geese are a lot of work, and we like to go out there and throw out some duck decoys, shoot ducks, and not get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and put out a 1,000 ride. And it hasn't changed. And of course, now we've lost all our geese down there for the most part. And so, you take 40 years of doing this, and just kind of concentrating on ducks. And to be honest with you, when the geese do move in, sometimes they're trouble, because they're like a big lawnmower, and they can hit a duck pond, and you get 30, 40,000 geese on a duck pond, and they can hit that food pretty hard within 2 or 3 days. And so now we don't really have that problem. And so it's up to the ducks of whether they're going to eat themselves out of house and home. But boy, those geese can do it. Like I said, in 2 or 3 days. So.
I've seen it firsthand. A pond basically disappears. There's nothing left but
Yeah.
water because all the food is gone by the time they get done with it. And they can do it quickly. Like you said, 20, 30, 40,000 birds, as ravenous as snows are, they'll just take it out quickly. Of course, I'm insane, though. I'd have been chasing those snow geese. I was chasing those snow geese around everywhere in that area in those days. You're guiding folks all over from Garwood to El Campo to Markham to Bay City and all over. Same areas y'all were in. Let's discuss something that's really unique about Thunderbird Hunting Club as well, from an aspect that I know from being in a couple of clubs in Arkansas and places like that that's really unique. I've only seen this really more out West Coast and California. It's the 3-day hunting model.
Yeah, so what we've learned, there was a time when we hunted 7 days a week. And so you kind of, as a manager, you sit back and you watch the behavior of hunters. And, everybody's heard of the 90-10 rule. It applies to death clubs too. So what was happening is there were a number, not all of them, but there was a silent or a smaller majority or a smaller minority of folks that were hunting 7 days a week. Okay. The vast majority of the club was made up of guys that worked in Houston, were doctors, lawyers, businessmen. They can hunt Saturday. And so you got that smaller group that's in there hunting 6-7 days. Well, they're blowing all the birds off all the ponds. And so over the years, we slowly kind of watched what was going on. And it's kind of hard to make it, where one size fits all. But I think we're kind of there. And that one size that fits all is a 3-day model. And that 3-day model is we hunt Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that gives a bird a Monday, Tuesday rest, and it gives a bird a Thursday, Friday rest. And nothing attracts ducks to a pond quicker than other ducks flapping around on the pond, because one is when they fly over ponds, they literally can see if it's clear water with the food down there. And then if they see birds on the thing, they feel secure, and boom, they suck other birds in there, so you'll have something on the other day. And with that said, this applies to our area. It doesn't necessarily apply to Kansas or California or Montana or rivers or whatever. But the birds that we shoot are pretty much the birds we flush out of that pond that morning. And so if you don't have birds sitting on that pond, odds are you're probably not going to have a great hunt. And so it is imperative that we have birds, coming in these ponds, building up big numbers. And by big numbers, for us to have a decent duck hunt, on average, we need 400 to 500 ducks. And if we have 1,000 ducks on a pond, that's pretty much, an indication that the hunters or game hunters are going to be able to shoot a limit of birds. So you would think 1,000 ducks and it would be no sweat shooting 24 birds. But, if you get some hunters in there that don't understand how to hunt, and don't set up on the X, then they very well may not shoot a limit of birds. So I've seen extremes of both. I've seen hunters go into a pond with 200-300 ducks and shoot a limit of birds. I've seen, newbies go into a pond and with 1,000 birds on it, not walk out with a limit. So part of the process too, we do at the club is we try to educate everybody, and we educate them in a number of ways. John, you receive my newsletters that I send out every week where we're informing people, where we're seeing birds and how everybody's doing. And then we have these massive scouting trips that the managers go on every Tuesday and Friday. And they literally will spend at least a half a day, sometimes a whole day, running all these properties, finding out where the birds are, report that back to the membership. And we really want people to hunt right on that X. And then there's another ingredient that's really, really important is we we're a mix of hunters that come together with different personalities and different backgrounds and different skill sets. And we have to manage them, put them all together and get them to get along. Well, because we shoot so many birds, what happens is it's not competitive. We want to, the members help each other. So that's a big part of the success of Thunderbird is this membership is, I don't know how other clubs are doing, But this membership is great from the standpoint that we had 2 openings this year. Those 2 new members that came into the club this year, I guarantee you, all of the old members are going to take them under the wing, and they're going to educate them to the process where they're going to be acclimated to the system so quickly that they're going to know the program, how we kill birds, and they'll come away with a really good product at the end of the day. And we couldn't do that without members working together with each other. So
yeah, that's great. I said I've been involved with clubs before where that's not the case at all. You've got people that are really at each other's throats sometimes, and it's pretty interesting how you got to really able to manage that many people and keep everybody happy. It's really pretty cool. And I have to point to that 3-day model in a lot of ways. Success because of the fact that you just keep the pressure off of them, again, which is, can be relentless down there. Like you say, 7 days a week, birds are just being pounded on, and keeping that pressure off those ponds has got to really up the numbers in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, so here's a real simple statement that's kind of like a no-brainer. Ducks don't like to be shot at. But
right.
There's a lot of duck hunters that don't get that concept, and they will go out there and just hunt and hunt and hunt. And it literally, to get a pond to produce back-to-back hunts is a hard deal. I mean, it's kind of like you're going into a fishing hole and you cut all the rainbow trout out of the fishing hole and expect to go back the second day and catch more rainbow trout. Well, it's the same thing here. One of the phrases I coined in the early days is, as we were trying to, manage this club, is we have a product that flies away. And unlike, deer hunting where, the deer are going to be, in that pasture or in that woodlot, and they may go hide and stuff, but they're still there. Well, our product can get up and within 24 hours be in Louisiana if they decide, they don't like what's going on here. So we try to make them as happy as they can, and it dichotomy somewhat from the standpoint that on one hand we're shooting at them, but on the other hand these ducks are happy. And kind of maybe getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but we're keeping. I mentioned earlier that we started water wells up this morning. We literally have water on the ground for these birds 9 months out of the year. So if you look at how many days we actually hunt ducks, which is probably about 45 or something like that, maybe even less than that. So, a month out of the year we hunt ducks, and the other 8 months, the ducks have free reign to eat, sleep, and do whatever they want on these ponds. And it really, really helps the birds, So it's not about we shoot a lot of ducks, but I can guarantee you we're providing a lot of good habitat to really help these birds. And not just the ducks, but, all the other wetlands type creatures that are out there, from fish to, nematodes to, great egrets, and you name it. They're all out there using this habitat, and I right yesterday, I was out, and there's all kinds of broods of black-bellied tree ducks and fulvous tree ducks and mottled ducks. We don't necessarily keep water on all our ponds at this time of year, but we left some of it on for various reasons. And one of the reasons we left it on there just to help the birds nesting down here, because right now we're in a drought, and they pretty much like what we left for them. So.
That's a good point. And I got to see this firsthand, folks, on the DU Nation filming, is all of the wildlife that's surrounding these wetland areas. That's a very important point. This is not just for ducks. This is for a myriad of species of different birds. Like you said, from frogs to snakes to all kind of aquatic life. These ponds really hold it all. And and this is a big breeding area. Mostly everybody thinks about, Canada and all this. But for certain species, black-bellied, whistling ducks, fulvous ducks, mottled ducks, this is their breeding ground too.
Yep. And we actually have some blue-winged teal nesting this year down here. So not real common, but they do nest down here. So
I did see a few blue wings in the air. That's right. it's helping out a tremendous amount of wildlife in these areas. And so let's use that transition. I want to move into that and talking about the habitat management, because that's the whole key to y'all having all the tremendous amount of birds that you have. So take us through the steps, Todd. We were in a pond just last week that was being built. You've got maintainers and dirt moving machines everywhere, and just take us through start to finish on how it all comes together.
Well, I'll back up a little bit on how a year kind of unfolds. We get through the hunting season, and then the first thing I start looking at is where is the system failing, and by the system failing, I'm talking about nutrient damage going into water canals that are spewing water all over the landscape where I don't want it to go to erosion, taking down banks on ponds. Sometimes we've had water drilling people come in and rework a water well to get it to flow better. So we're in this kind of, I'll call it the repair mode that occurs early in the spring, that we're trying to make sure the infrastructure is up and running as best as possible, so that when we do start flooding all these ponds, I'm not dealing with repair modes. I'm just dealing with making the habitat, and then new ponds being built. We typically build them in the springtime. If we wait too long, this ground will turn into concrete if we get into like a bad drought that we're into right now, and the machinery will just bounce off of this stuff like they're trying to, build ponds with concrete. I mean, we have literally had in the years past, midsummer, where we can't build duck ponds, or we can't do anything because the ground's so hard. And so anyway, so we go into the repair mode, and then the prep mode, which we're just about to start any day now. And let me say this about duck ponds. Every duck pond is different, and everyone has different needs, and you have to understand what those needs are. And it could be the depth of the water. It could be whether you burned it, you shredded it. There is no manual out there. If I wanted to write a book about how to do all this stuff, I couldn't do it, because every single year is different. And I kind of look at what Mother Nature gives me, and if she gives me a bunch of Sprangletop in a duck pond, then I leave that Sprangletop alone. If she gives me another type of aquatic, I leave that alone. Yesterday, we literally had a pond that we caught all that rainwater earlier in the year, and I pulled the plug on it because I had a plant coming up called burrhead, which is not a good plant for anything, not good for cattle, not good for duck, was taking over the whole pond. So we're literally draining that pond, and odds are I'll probably bring a tractor in there, and I'll disc all that burrweed under, get water on top of it as quickly as I can, and stimulate the aquatics to get up before the burrweed comes up and rears its ugly head again. And so, John, we talked about this a little bit in DU Nation, but within a handful of soil is millions of thousands of different seeds in there. And depending on what you do to that soil will determine what's going to pop up for the ducks to eat. And like I said, every pond's different. I mean, you can't force one pond to grow something if it's not in the seed base. And a lot of people go out there and they buy food and they plant it. And I kind of look at it as kind of it probably works on smaller ponds, but when you're dealing with some 100-acre ponds and stuff like that, it's better to go into a pond and manipulate the environment. Like I said, it could be our main tool is bringing big tractors and disking it, but at times we won't do that. At times I'll flood. We're flooding a pond right now that has a plant in there called dwarf spike rush, which the ducks just love they eat the roots, the little seeds on it. Well, we're flooding that right now because it's all over the field. And the cattle will benefit from it too when that stuff starts growing up. And so in this particular case, I elected not to disc it or burn it or shred it Instead, I went ahead and I'm just flooding it because I know what it's going to do for the ducks, especially if we go with teal coming down. It's going to be, it may not be, second crop rice, but it's going to be darn close. That's something that they like. And then after you're done, getting all the water on the landscape, then you play this kind of dance going around trying to maintain the water at the proper levels. And you'll try to get it, deep enough where the obnoxious grasses are going to come in and choke out the aquatics. And then if you're in a bad route like we're in right now, I'm just pumping on ponds, trying to keep the aquatics alive in the pond. And sometimes it's a struggle. I can at the beginning of the season, we calculate, how many acre feet, comes out of a water well and where we're going to flood. But sometimes Mother Nature puts us really behind on all that. And we just got to keep it going. And then as the season progresses and food comes up, then I'm looking at the different water levels. So, a blue heron is going to want, deeper water to kind of somewhat feed in. A snow goose wants a little bit shallower water, or a pintail wants a little bit shallower water. A teal and a shoveler, they want to skim across, really, really shallow water. So we're trying to provide kind of a good mixture of habitat down here. Luckily where we are down here, we have, I think one year we shot 18, 19 different species of ducks. And so we're not a mallard is not our prime bird, and pintails is not our prime bird, and teal on our prime bird. It's a mixture of all these ducks coming down here. And so we're trying to provide as much habitat we can with a bunch of diversity. And these birds will move around as water levels change and all that. And as the season progresses, one of the other things we got to do is, and I'm talking about, we're in the middle of duck season, that I got to watch the water levels. And so I got to be careful of two factors. One is I can't be running around on the duck pond looking at all the duck ponds and spooking all the ducks off of it. So I kind of get feedback from the membership, what's going on in the pond, what's the water level, are there aquatics on the surface, or have the ducks eaten it all out? And as the season progresses, if the ducks have wiped out that first 2 or 3 inches of aquatics, then I'm pulling the water down so they can reach what's left on the bottom. Or we could get in a situation where Mother Nature dumps, 6 inches of rain on us overnight. Well, then I'm scrambling trying to drain water off of ponds. And that's one of the hard things that people have spent all this money pumping up duck ponds, and then suddenly, they got to pull the plug. It's very rare for people to want to go pull a plug on a duck pond and drain off 6 inches of water. But we will do that if we have to make sure those ducks can reach the pond. So it's something that as we go into hunting season, we're still constantly maintaining water levels to allow the birds to get to the food. Plus, they have to have that shallow water roost in. If the pond is 1.5 feet deep, they'll go in there sometimes to roost. But ideally, what ducks want to roost in is they want to put their foot on the ground. And so we're trying to provide, a roosting area, preening area, feeding area, all of the duck at the same time. That's the ideal duck pond, where they don't have to go anywhere. They can just sit there and be content on one duck pond.
Man, that's a lot of great information, Todd. That huge point that you brought up there in the water levels. I see it so much. Like you said, it's so hard to pump up water and spend a bunch of money pumping water and then get a big rain and you're like, oh yeah, well that's great. It's just going to keep that water on that landscape. And then the ducks quit using it because it's too deep. They can't get to the food. And, it takes a while for them to get back for the water level to drop. So that's a huge point, is that you've really got to watch the water levels closely.
Yeah. And ducks will leave overnight. So you get a 6-inch rain. They intuitively know that it's raining somewhere and new food sources have been opened up for them, like seeds and stuff like that and grasses. They sometimes will just get up and leave overnight. And so you want to try to get them back in the barn as quick as you can by, getting those water levels down. And one other point that I forgot to mention was muddy water. So Down along the coast here, we have a lot of clay, and sometimes that clay can get suspended. Well, it's a kind of a kiss of death if you're initially trying to start a duck pond and you got muddy water, because that sunlight will not penetrate down to stimulate the plant growth. And last year, there was probably at least 2 or 3 incidents where Mother Nature just churned up the winds and churned up the water, and it all turned muddy on me before the aquatics got going, that I literally opened up the plug and drained the water off the landscape. And that's thousands of dollars going down the drain instantly, and that's a hard deal to do, but I had to do it because some of these ponds were some of our best producing ponds, and I had to get clear water on there. So clear water is really important. And I don't think anybody really has a lot of scientific knowledge about why these plants down here grow so quickly. But in talking with Todd Steele, as a regional manager with DU and stuff, he believes that when that well water comes out and it hits the landscape, which is like, an inferno out there right now, and they get that cool water on there, that sunlight penetrating, that cool water just sets that whole food chain, off with the aquatics growing up and everything. So it's that clear, cool well water is real important.
Excellent. Yeah, Todd Marandino, that guy's forgotten more about ducks than I'll ever know. For sure.
Yeah, one of the things I always coined that Marandino said, he said, habitat management is not rocket science. It's much harder than rocket science. And then on there is some truth to that, because a lot of people just think that, once again, I go back to, what do you do the rest of the year? And still to this day, I have members who come down and they just think that, these duck ponds are here all year long, or we just, turn on the water hose and fill them up and pull the plug at the end of the year, and they don't realize how much effort goes into it. And some of them do, but some of them don't, and it's a lot of work, but it's a labor of love.
Right. And on that, we're going to stop for a second, folks, and take a break, but stay tuned for more with Todd Steele.
Stay tuned to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, after these messages.
Hey, folks, welcome back to the DU podcast. We're here with Todd Steele, manager of Thunderbird Hunting Club, southwest of Houston, Texas, near the El Campo area. Would you say that's correct, Todd?
Yeah, El Campo all the way down to Palacios. We have kind of a swath of properties that we manage through that region. And this is kind of a historic area. Of course, this was, at one time the great snow goose, corridor, and speckled bellies too. That ancient kind of flyway is the Colorado River that they come down on both sides of it. And I guess if you look back at the old books and stuff like that, the Colorado River used to just spew, water out of its bank from log jams and everything else. And there were swaths of land that were flooded, 20, 30 miles from the river itself. Migration is part fueled by a learned behavior and is part fueled by genetic behavior that we don't quite understand. And I still to this day believe that, these birds are following, ancient corridors that, their ancestors followed. And proof to that is, a cold front hits North Dakota and all of a sudden overnight, all those birds get out. Well, they have genetically learned that if they stick around for North Dakota, blustery, cold front that's going to freeze everything over, they're not going to have any water or food. So even to this day, birds will get up and migrate when they get hit by that big cold front. That's not necessarily a learned behavior. I believe it's a genetic behavior that it just been wired that we got to get out of Dodge.
Yeah, that's got to be correct. there's just no other way it happens, especially in mass migrations of birds. They've got to be wired that way, that they're just going to go south. Okay, they really can't rely on their parents or whatever. I don't think to teach them that in a lot of cases. They just know, and they head farther south. We were talking about flooding areas this time of year. You've already got the pumps going, the wells going down there at Thunderbird. Let's talk a bit about moist soil plants and aquatics. I know in this part of the world, stuff like pink smartweed, barnyard grasses, and stuff like that are really good. What's your favorite aquatic plant to see growing up in a project?
So there's basically two types of duck food down here. One is, your emergence, which will be your smartweed and your barnyard grass, your millets coming up above the surface. And then the other is aquatics. One of the problems that I have down on most of the properties is we have cattle on it. So the cattle will come often. They won't hit smartweed, but they will hit, some of your grasses that are trying to seed out and chop down. So over the years, I've learned it's probably better to try to put the efforts into managing aquatics than it is the emergence that come up. And then over the years, I've watched birds in this area come down and understand, too, that we're watching these birds every single day from, this time forward. We're going to be out every day seeing what these birds do. We see massive migration. We watch where they're going to feed, where they're going to roost, and all that. And their preference when they come down to this area, if you give them two food sources, you give them one with a bunch of barnyard grass and seed it out, and you give them one that's filled up with aquatics that's matted up to the surface, they're going to every single time go into the aquatics. That's what they like to eat. So it's kind of like a buffet. You go into a buffet and there's steak and lobster and there's some hamburger over there. You're going to go to the steak and lobster. The hamburger, you'll eat that if all the steak and lobster's gone. And so I kind of look upon the barnyard grasses, the smartweed and stuff like that a little bit differently. If they have the choice, they're going to go to aquatic. Now, with all that said, the top aquatics that we have down here, there's a plant called Southern Ned. It is a big one. Muskgrass, which is actually an algae. They like that. Algae, widgeon grass is another one. Widgeon grass is more kind of a coastal plant that comes up and likes a little bit of salinity in the water. Sago and longleaf pondweed is another one. There is a plant called duck salad, which sounds like, duck's gonna keep going crazy on it. But that's kind of an emergent that comes up. It's a kind of a leafy looking lettuce type of plant. And they won't hit that immediately. But last year we had some big stands of it. And when they started chomping down on all the other aquatics, then they started hitting that. And so the birds are kind of creatures of opportunity. And I've seen them go into ponds where we have a plant called sumpweed, which isn't something that you can look up and say, oh, that's a great duck food. But I have seen green-winged teal just clobber sumpweed at times, only because that's what they had in that particular area to eat. And so they found it, they liked it, and they just, started going. Another one is a plant called toothcup, which is another emergent, had a little red seed on it. I have seen this in years past where gadwalls will get in there, and gadwalls are mostly kind of associated with eating aquatics, but I have seen them get into toothcup and just, hit it really hard. And so once again, it's kind of the opportunity exists and they go after it. Barnyard grouse is another good one. So green-winged teal, more so than blue-winged teal. Green-winged teal, seeds, like pintails do at times. And so when the aquatics start getting low, they will gravitate towards various millets and stuff that are real low where they can reach it real easily. And even some of the sedges, which I don't really like, but the sedges will sometimes drop, massive amounts of seeds on the ground, and the wind will blow it up against one side of a pond, and those birds will go in there and they'll eat that. And in fact, speaking of which, so if you ever watch, everybody tells you to hunt on the north side of a pond with a north wind. But sometimes you'll see all the birds on the south end of the pond, and you're going, what's up with that? Well, what's up with that is all the feed has blown to that south end, and the aquatics they've yanked up is all blown to the south end of the pond with a north wind, and they're feeding heavily down there because that's where all the food is. And so sometimes you have to go to hunt the south end of a pond with a north wind. And once again, that goes back to, helping our hunters, our members, by scouting and saying, you don't want to hunt the north end of that pond. You want to hunt the south end. I know it's not intuitive to do that, but that's where you need to go because that's where those birds are going to be. And the X, and I think you're going to cover this a little bit later, John, but the X is so important that I have seen it, that if you're off of that X by even 100 yards, sometimes your hunt will not be. Those birds know, kind of like going into downtown and you got 5 or 6 different restaurants to choose. You go into that one restaurant. Well, the birds do the same thing. They fly over a pond. They know the day before where they had good chow sitting in that one restaurant, and they will beeline towards that one restaurant to eat. So real important to be on the X.
Isn't it the truth? Yeah, let's just go ahead and switch gears to that, Todd. You're a highly experienced duck hunter. I know that country like the back of your hand. And as you said, location is the absolute number one key, and it can't be overstated that if you're off of the spot by, it didn't even have to be 100 yards, 50 yards sometimes, it's totally going to make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Aside from location, what do you think is number 2 as far as duck hunting goes for success?
I would say, we've had world champion duck callers down here, and I'll watch the birds' behavior, and it doesn't really matter. They're more attracted to decoy spreads down there than duck calling, and this is me speaking. Other people may argue differently, but I would say duck calling in our neck of the woods is probably effective. Maybe 15% of the time. I blow a duck call just because it's part of the game. But to be honest with you, either those ducks are going to come in or not. I think decoy spreads are probably second most important. And I will often, I like big numbers. I mean, I know people out there write articles about, you need to go to smaller spreads late in the season. That's not the case down here. I mean, you got to give them a different look. They're used to seeing 6 dozen decoys, down through the whole flyway. And late in the season, I would say, let's say the second split, which is the beginning of December, I'll start putting out massive spreads. By massive spreads, I mean, 200 duck decoys. And these are duck decoys that we don't leave out. We pull them up every single day. And so what I tell the members is they kind of grimace when they go to hunt them. They said, look, I said, we're going from your 100 duck decoys to 200. In the big scheme of things, putting out an extra 100 duck decoys is going to take you maybe 10, 15 minutes in the morning and maybe 20, 25 minutes in the, when you're picking them up. So all told, maybe 45 minutes. I said, you spent all this money, all this time. What's 45 minutes to have a superior hunt as opposed to, give them a 6 dozen or 8 dozen duck decoys that they see all the time. So decoy spreads and numbers, I think, are the most important thing. And don't clump them together. You gotta, if you're out, watching ducks in a park and stuff, the ducks are not all, gathered up around a duck blind. They're scattered all over the place. And so you gotta spread your decoys out and you gotta make them look natural. And yeah, it takes a lot more effort to drag them out 50 yards behind your duck blind to get a big wad of decoys behind there. But it really kind of dupes the bird, into thinking this is a real McCoy down there. So I would say decoy spreads are probably your second most important, at least down here. Now, if you're up in Arkansas, that's different. Calling is probably number one.
Well, you're calling to a lot of mallards in this part of the world versus down there. Most of the ducks whistle down there. Let's face it, between the widgeons and the green wings, pintails, you hear a lot more whistling going on than you do quacking, that's for sure. So you can really over quack a lot in Texas coast for sure. You can probably I think you're right. about that, Todd. And I can tell you folks that, yeah, when Todd's talking about decoys, I mean, he is not a lazy decoy man. And I think he's schooled a lot of his members into that same principle that the more decoys, the better. And it really makes a difference, though, in the success.
Yeah, and so here's another kind of evolution in the club. It's interesting to watch the dynamic of the club as it evolves over the year. And it's not necessarily me, leading the pack. It's a pack leading the pack kind of thing. And so there was a time when, back in the, the 70s and 80s, to get to a duck spot when it was wet, you locked your big 4-wheel drive truck in there and rutted up the farmer's roads and did your best to get back there without getting stuck. And so let's fast forward to today. Well, members in our club have these big monster Polarises with big monster tires on it, and they carry the kitchen sink with them out to the duck line. In fact, one of the things we do is we do have pit blinds in kind of strategic spots, but what we're finding is that taking temporary blinds, which are nothing more than a hog panel with fast grass, maybe painted, and some marsh stools, and sitting on that X is important. And then taking all your decoys and carrying it on that Polaris, you're basically, like I said, taking the kitchen sink out to the ducks. And that is part of the reason we shoot a lot of ducks, is because we can do that. And probably if you look back even 15 years ago, we didn't have that kind of technology with our ATVs to be able to drag all that stuff in. And so we were kind of, kind of chaining the ball to our pit lines that we had out there with, our typical 100 duck decoys out there. And we were trying to force ducks to come into those pit lines. And so the evolution to today is now we bring what the ducks want to see to wherever they're feeding. And that's been somewhat key to our success. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we're shooting ducks, but that was one of the big ones.
It's a combination of all those factors. And you're right. The UTV, the 4-seat Polaris, the K&Ms, all that has changed the game in such a huge way. When I was a kid, right, the 3-wheelers first came along, we thought that was the greatest thing on the face of the earth, that you didn't have to walk everywhere. And then the 4-wheelers, and then the 6-wheel Polarises, and now the UTVs with big beds on them that you can, like I said, you can really carry the kitchen sink into an area where before it was really impossible.
Yep. That's and a good friend of ours, Shannon Hopkins, he used to be the outdoor writer of Houston Chronicles, said these UTVs have extended the duck hunter's career or life, whatever you want to call it, probably about 15, 20 years, because if you think back, how it was 30, 40 years ago, because the days of, putting on, red ball, rubber waders and a big strap of duck decoys on your back and wade into the marsh, is, a good way to have a heart attack. So. That's
a young man's game right there.
That's right. Yes, sir.
I like the blind concept that y'all have with the cattle panels and the fast grass. It's easy to deploy, easy to pick up, and I think more folks would have a lot of success if they would take a look at that, because there's a lot of portable blinds out there in the market that are good. It's just these, I think, really lend themselves to, I don't know how to say it. I mean, just being able to put it on the X quickly, more so than having to put together frames and everything else.
And so that's part of the secret too of getting on that X and carrying say the kitchen sink out there, that you want to be able to deploy the stuff as quickly as possible. Otherwise, you're doing the 1,000 rag spread, right? You're getting up at 3 a.m. to put all this stuff up, and so even the decoys. When you think about the decoys that have evolved over the years. So now they have, lightweight, decoys that, have kind of keels that will, flip up. And we have tangle-free, line that really is tangle-free, that, you just throw them in the water and you just start scattering them out as quickly as you can. Everything you can do to speed up that process enables you to put more gear out in the field and it helps you shoot more ducks. I mean, my Polaris that I actually have fishing rod racks on the front rack, and I can load up 6 to 8 robo-ducks on the side, and they're all ready with wings attached, and all I got to do is pick them out and stuff. Well, think back 40 years ago. I don't even think they had robo-ducks 40 years ago, but trying to just drag 8 robo-ducks on your back as you're walking into a marsh was just nearly impossible. So deployment of robo-ducks and decoys and all of that combined is real effective. And just take the temporary bind a step further. So we camouflage them with fast grass, and so fast grass is kind of down here. Everything stays green for a long time, and so one thing you probably want to do is go on there with some flat green spray paint and try to get it to kind of match, what a tuft of grass looks like, on an island out there or something like that. And we take it a step further, we cut fresh cane, which is green, and we put that around our duck blinds to kind of even break it up even more. So it's just not a flat panel out there. And in fact, this year, we bought, I don't know, $6,000-$7,000 worth of bamboo. We planted it, and we got an irrigation system and stuff. So we'll have, in 2 years, we're going to have fresh bamboo here at our hunting lodge that I don't know how long it's going to last, because we go through a lot of bamboo through the course of the year. But we literally, the importance of bamboo is so good that we decided to go ahead and spend the money on planting bamboo, putting an irrigation system in, and having fresh bamboo right nearby at the lodge. So
yeah, breaking up your outline is huge. If you can get away from the square,
That's
so
right.
many duck
Yep.
blinds, you can just pick them out, look out there and across the field. Oh, that's a blind. You can see it plain as day soaking a duck.
And your dog porch, right? So we have dog porches out there too, so the dogs can not be standing in cold water. And it's important to just not have your dog out there, out there in the open, like a coyote standing there. And no duck in his right mind wants to land next to a coyote sitting on a dog porch, right? So you want to keep that. Now, of course, your dog, I mean, if it's an experienced dog, he's going to be swinging his head 360 degrees, throughout the morning, watch for ducks so he can get a jump on. When you do shoot a duck, you've got it marked well, you'll find it and stuff like that. So you want to try to, cover up that, that dog kind of swinging his head all over the place, looking for where that duck's going to fall. So
I love that Momarsh Invisilab system with a stand with a dog blind on it. I think that's been one of the biggest innovations for retrievers that have come along in the last 20, 30 years, really.
Yep. And so as early as 2 years ago, very few members had that, and now I'm starting to see more and more of them. We're trying to encourage more and more of them to have those blinds out there, and plus it makes your dog maybe a little bit more steady too, that he's inside that enclosure and stuff like that. So that helps a lot.
It does. Talking about the dogs, I know you're a big retriever guy like me. That's such a huge part of the hunt to me, is the dog. And a well-trained dog is a really pleasant experience, where a not well-trained dog is not. And, I've seen your dogs in action. They're top-notch.
Yeah, we've always said that, look, the duck blind is not the place you need to be training your dog, because, A is you're going to get frustrated with it. And your frustration is not going to change that dog. The training should have been done throughout. You had all year to train the dog, or have a trainer train it, and trying to train it out in the duck blind is just going to lead to frustration. Plus, it's going to be, very disruptive to the hunt for others in there too. And there's just, there's nothing finer than having a couple labs in a duck blind that are well behaved and top notch retrievers. So,
it's huge, and nothing will get you invited on more hunts than having a really good dog, and nothing will have your phone never ring again than having a dog that's no good.
That's true. That's true. So And that's part of the process that, we talk about managing hunters and stuff like that. But it's one of the things that we have to very subtly, not just myself, but managers too, say, look, you may I politely hand you a rope to your breaking dog, and so your dog won't break anymore. I mean, and so you gotta, make the member understand that, you're not going to get invited in that group of hunters if your dog is a derelict dog going out there doing, running around like with his head chopped off, and breaking all the time. It's important to, have a good companion out there. But like you said, it's just it's part of, I don't know how people. Well, I've had members stop duck hunting because their dog died. I mean, that's how important dogs are to people. And I've had labs my whole life. I had to put down a 14-year-old lab earlier this spring, and if I didn't have another lab in the bread basket or on the ground, there is a good likelihood I'd just say I'm not going to duck hunt anymore. But I've always learned that, okay, so as that older lab is getting on his last leg, you better have another lab, ready to go. And it's kind of heartbreaking to, leave your old lab behind and have the young buck out there retrieving birds. Part of the process, and I guess part of the pain of having a companion you've had for so many years out there with you. So
yeah, that's very true. I've gotten to the point where I like to, by the time my dog's like 5 or 6, have a young one coming up, just kind of time it out. Like I said, it's a shame they don't last nearly as long as you'd want them to. They give everything they got to you, and retrievers are such great animals. Pointing dogs, I mean dogs period, are great animals, but retrievers have just the special bond that they have with the hunter is unbelievable. Man, it's been great, Todd. I tell you what, I'm gonna close this out. I like to do this with a lot of the guests, is talk about a hunt that really sticks out in your mind for whatever reason. It could be a great hunt, bad hunt, something crazy happened, anything that just pops into your head right off the top.
Yeah. So you do this every year, and you think you've seen everything there is in the waterfowl world, and this isn't a duck hunt. I've had a lot of great duck hunts. My wife and I were down, I would say it was probably October, and we were doing our typical run on all our ponds, checking water levels and plant growth and all that, and we witnessed a major migration of birds, and we've seen lots of migration of birds coming in, but this one was just absolutely phenomenal because we were in a drought throughout the Midwest. Texas was in a drought. A lot of water on the landscape down here, so these birds were looking for, like I said before, when they fly over, they can see good habitat down below, and it was thousands upon thousands. And when I say thousands, there were times we would look up in the sky. This was an evening that we would see thousands of pintails and gadwalls and redheads. I mean, just plummeting out of the sky, just awesome. And no circling. I mean, they would just roar into these parks because they just had migrated, who knows where for, 12, 18 hours. And they were exhausted. They want to get drinking water. And we watched this for hours. I mean, just watching the birds come in. And then as we were walking out, the teal started coming in. And they came in like freight trains, literally. I mean, waves of them, 200-300 at a time, 30, 40 feet over our head. The sun was coming up, or the sun was sitting down, and everything was red, and you just silhouetted those birds, and they were just pouring over our head. And, like I said, you do it a long time, and you sit there and go, well, I've seen it all.
It is quite fascinating to see a mass migration. Now, all the stars have to align for it to happen. That's the key. And I think this past year, like I said, the dry conditions in the Midwest really, they didn't have anywhere else to go. They came farther south quicker than they have in the last few years. And when catching that mass migration is something special. That's for sure. Well, Todd, thanks so much for being on the DU podcast. It's just been great and very educational.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
And folks, like I said, I'm not sure exactly when it's going to come out, within the next couple of months or so. You can see that habitat film that we put together with Todd and one of our guys on the ground down there for Ducks Unlimited, Taylor Abshire. He's a local kid down there and has really done a tremendous job working with the Texas Prairie Wetlands Project and local landowners to really develop some great habitat on the ground. And we really appreciate what he does. And we'll be back, Todd. It won't be too long. It'll be back in December. We'll be back down there filming with you again.
Yes, sir. Looking forward to it.
That's going to be fun. We can revisit some of the same places we filmed this past time in the summertime. Take a look at them now and see the birds on the ground and really see the fruits of your labor. It's going to be fantastic. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the DU podcast. And once again, thanks for supporting wetlands and waterfowl conservation.
Thank you for listening to the DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show and visit ducks.org/DU Podcast. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.